প্ৰিয়শ্ৰোতা আৰম্ভ কৰিব ওলাইছোঁ আমাৰ শিক্ষামূলক অনুষ্ঠান ৰেডিঅ' ক্লাছৰুম। আজি ৰেডিঅ' ক্লাছৰুমত উপস্থিত আছে গোৱালপাৰা মহাবিদ্যালয়ৰ ভূগোল বিজ্ঞান বিভাগৰ সহকাৰী অধ্যাপিকা ৰশ্মি হাজৰিকা। বাইদেউ, আপোনাক আমাৰ ষ্টুডিঅ'লৈ বহুত বহুত স্বাগত জনাইছোঁ।
ধন্যবাদ। Dear students, today I will discuss about the Heartland and Rimland theory. Both the theories talk about the evolution of geopolitics of the world. Geopolitics is made up of two words, geo and politics, which refers to the change in polity of the world due to geographical factors. Both the theories talk about the sea power and the land powers. Sea powers refers to the countries having a large sea boundaries, and land powers refers to countries that are landlocked or have a large land boundaries. For example, India has a long coastline while Nepal is a landlocked country. However, British political geographer Professor H.J. Mackinder contradicted his theory and proposed a reverse antithetical spatial model of land and sea conflict, where the supremacy of land power was due to its location, inaccessibility from all sides, and resource pass. First, Mackinder's Heartland theory. Sir Halford Mackinder was one of those few geographers of the world who had laid down a new traditions in the contemporary political geography through his innovative ideological heritage, which till recently had some relevance in the global political pattern. Mackinder developed his world strategic model at a crucial period in the world economy when Britain was losing her political and economic leadership. In the 19th century, Britain had been the champion of liberal world economy when she could dominate. The rise of USA and Germany in the final quarter of the century dramatically changed the situation. Mackinder's theory is a spatial analysis of the geopolitics in terms of its location, accessibility, and natural resource base. His theory has laid down the principle of geographical causation of history, which means that the pulsation in human history have been caused by the geographical conditions. Mackinder interpreted history as essentially a struggle between land and sea power and presented his paper, The Geographical Pivot of History, in order to elucidate his formula of geographical causation in world history. The political history of the world, fate of civilization, and the changing paradigm of nations have been majestically controlled by geographical causations. Mackinder theorized the hypothesis of geopolitical rivalry between land power and sea power, and thus conflict led to several wars. Mackinder postulated the resource theory and location as a resource. The natural resource endowment is the basis of sustenance of a country and its supremacy over others as well. Since natural resources are found on land, for example, nuclear energy requires uranium as a raw material, which is found mainly in land. On the basis of physical map of the world, Mackinder concluded that on the global scale, the Earth's surface consisted of a huge and continuous landmass, for example Europe, Asia and Africa, and some isolated island, for example North and South America, Australia and Great Britain and Japan. He named these huge united landmass of Europe, Asia and Africa as the world island, which accounts for 2/3 of the total area of Earth, being 11 million square kilometer and also 88% of the total population of the world. The concept of world island is central to the theoretical concept of Mackinder. The rest of the continent supported by only 1/8 of the mankind. Mackinder suggested that the Columbia era of sea power age of discovery with Columbus, Marco Polo, etc., which had given Europe its pivotal role for the past 4 centuries, was coming to close and was being eclipsed by the ascendancy of land-based power, and in particular with a new geopolitical pivot of history, namely the heartland of Europe, Asia. Mackinder divided the world into 3 tiers, specially organized systems. In 1903, he published a book titled Geographical Pivot of History, containing the world map. The 3-tier comprises pivot area or heartland, inner crescent and outer crescent. First we'll discuss about the pivot area or heartland. It is surrounded by mountains on 3 sides and the ice-bound Arctic on the north. It consisted of the whole Siberia and part of Central Asia like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan. It was surrounded by the vast ice field of Arctic in north and Urals in west, Central Asian highland in south and East Siberian highland in east. It was thus termed as natural fortress or the uppermost citadel of the world. As it was not accessible to sea power, the pivot area has a concentration of all natural resources, for example, minerals, water, soil, forest, etc. Now come to inner crescent area. The inner crescent is the next area. Mainly the pivot area was pictured by Mackinder as surrounded by an inner or marginal crescent consisting of an arc of coastline and characterized by drainage into navigable seas. This inner or marginal crescent considered of the whole of Eurasia outside the heartland. It symbolizes the sea power and includes countries like Europe, Southwest Asia, North Africa, India, China, but some parts of China is in pivot area also. Most of the human civilization are located in the inner crescent area and it is coterminous with the old world, that is pre-Columbian world. Now come to outer crescent area or insular crescent area. It is outside the inner or marginal crescent, lay Mackinder's 3rd tier, which he named as the outer or insular crescent. Mackinder suggested it to have no geographical significance in the contemporary world. It included the New World like North America, South America, other parts of Africa, Pacific Island and Oceania. It is designated as outer crescent because of their complete insularity from the mainland of Eurasia. For Mackinder, the concept of world island is central to the theoretical percept. For him, whoever could gain control of world island would be in an almost unstoppable position to dominate the entire globe. In his opinion, the heartland having agricultural resources could conquer Europe, Middle East and Far East. The inner and outer crescent would follow later. Mackinder modified his strategic concept like heartland concept in 1919. In his modified concept, he presented this modified concept he presented in his book Democratic Ideals and Reality. It was as much elaborate theory and probably the most voluminous work in the entire political geography. The pivot area was modified and he called it heartland. In modified strategic heartland concept, he redefined heartland as the region to which sea power can be refused access. The heartland was much larger and it included the Volga Basin, steppes, Himalaya, Baltic Sea, Black Sea, Asia Minor, etc. Earlier, these areas were not included in the heartland areas. Because of the fall of the Russian Empire and emergence of the USSR as a superpower, Mackinder became more assertive in his theory of heartland in 1919. The world power seemed to be centralized around the heartland, which he said had all the resources and natural defense by physiographic factors. It is invincible and represented the supremacy of land power. He considered the southwest Ukrainian steppes as the only gateway to the heartland. It was called Southwestern Corridor. His second tier, or the inner crescent, now included the British Isles and the whole of Africa. The outer crescent consisted of New World. Mackenzie's famous dictum caught the attentions of the world. His famous dictum was, "Who ruled East Europe command the heartland. Who rules heartland commands the world island. Who rules the world island command the world." The key to control the heartland, Mackenzie later argued, lay in Eastern Europe. The heartland is the strongest fortress on earth, commanding resources of huge transcontinental area. Any power that could organize it effectively was bound to emerge as a great power in world politics. Next, he again modified his concept in the year 1943. Until 1919, Mackenzie had confined his attention to Eurasia and the Old World and did not give any attention to New World. In the 1920s, he claimed that the west of Europe and east of North America are physical complements of one another. During the Second World War, Mackenzie's theory was put to test. The heartland could have become the focus of power if either Russia had united with Germany or Russia had been overthrown by China or Japan. In the Second World War, during 1939 to 45, the USA emerged as another superpower, and the intense geopolitical rivalry between USSR and US-UK combined was foreseeable. The outcome of World War was palpable in the early 1940s. Therefore, Mackenzie was quick to reverse his theory before his death in 1943 in a magazine, Foreign Affairs, where he published his theory, The Round World and the Winning of Peace. He stated that the UK and New England region of the USA, older regions of 6 colonies, have a single race of people, uniform culture, isotopic geographical conditions, similar resource base. Thus, they are one civilization. Thus, there are 2 power centers in the world. Heartland mainly comprises USSR, and the Midland Basin mainly comprises US and UK combined. Mackenzie thought that this empty land and desert will prevent the spread of conflict to the outside world. Now, the applications of Mackenzie's theory. The applications of Mackenzie's theory can be divided into pre-Cold War, Cold War and post-Cold War period. During pre-Cold War, before 1945, Bolshevik revolutions and emergence of Russia as a superpower or land power, outcomes of First World War and defeat of Germany, that is, Germany was the sea power, and the world geopolitics hovering around East Europe, spread of communism in East Europe under influence of USSR, contemporary history between First World War and Second World War has many events that can lead us to believe that Mackenzie was true in his convictions. During Cold War 1945 to 91, his applications like Heartland was represented by USSR and Midland by US and UK combined the modified theory of Mackenzie of 1943. Cold War was a conflict between capitalism and socialism and not a proper war. Most of the geopolitics was centered around either East Europe and West Asia, which had the resources as well as peripheral locations or transitions location forming part of inner crescent. Present geopolitics can also be linked to it including Crimean annexation, West Asian crisis, which are part of inner crescent. During Cold War time, major events were Cuban Missile Crisis in the year 1962, West Asian crisis, geopolitics of India. Now come to post-World War after 1991. And during this period, unipolar world emerged with the USA and the Heartland had fallen. With Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the future can witness the re-emergence of Russia. Russia has lost its economic power, superpower, but not the defense technology strategic alignment. A possible strategic trade between Moscow, Beijing and New Delhi, that is BRICS. Multiple alignments are taking place now and the world is shifting towards a multipolar world. Now come to the criticism of Heartland theory. The first criticism was he simplified history in a deterministic fashion as a struggle between land and sea power, which is far from truth. History is influenced by physical, socio-economic and cultural factors with conflict of interest and not just geographical factors. Second criticism was Mackinder's constructed his theory on the basis of Mercator's map projection, and he thought that the USA and Russia are thousands of miles apart and that Arctic ice field are largely expansive. But actually, the USA is hundreds of miles from Siberia through Bering Strait. The third criticism was he tried to explain the present and prognosticate the future in terms of technology that had become outdated. He overlooked the fact that Heartland was a region of permanent difficulties because of its interior location and owing to the extreme of climate. It is too cold in winter and part of it are hot and dry in summer. Therefore, owing to these locational climatic factors, the Heartland is at a relatively disadvantage as compared to other larger well-endowed area. Next criticism was Heartland is easily accessible, crossing all the barriers with the help of airplanes. Heartlands is not as a resourceful as it was made out to be, and the greater part of Heartland is a wasteland, incapable of supporting a large population. With the development of technology and fast-moving fighters, ballistic and cruise missile, and fortress, that is, Heartland now lay open to air raids from all sides as much as any other place. Nuclear deterrence is the new policy that emerged after the Japan bombing. It is a fact that geopolitics has migrated from Germany to North America after the Second World War, and in the current scenario, geopolitics is shifting towards Asia, with China and India emerging as new power centers. The real world was not flat but spherical, and at the flat earth map used by Mackinder to utilize the pivot area thesis has led to a false sense of world geography. Next is the Spokesman-Rimland theory. In 1944, Spokesman, as the point of critique or antithetic to the Heartland theory, presented his book titled The Rimland Theory in his book The Geography of Peace. He gave a different interpretations of the relative importance of Heartland, that is land power, vice versa the surrounding inner and outer crescent. His theory has been based on two basic postulates of Mackinder: geographical causation of history, the conflict between land power and sea power. Spokesman, based on the same premises, built a new geopolitical model where the sea power was supreme and land power, being inaccessible, is inferior. Sea power has faster movement, greater accessibility, while land can be inaccessible due to hill, river, desert, etc. Sea powers have more than two-thirds populations of the world and thus full of human and technological resource. Most of the population is located on coastal area. Spikeman considered geographical feature as important determinants in foreign policy because of its emphasis on spatial variation. In medieval human history and the pre-modern era, naval power had supremacy over land power as they had navigation technology, ships, etc. For example, British, French, Germany, Portuguese, Spanish, Italy were all sea powers and whole world became the colonial house of these countries. Spikeman gave emphasis on maritime mobility as the basis of a new type of geopolitical structure. According to Spikeman, it is a sea power that governs the relationship between old and new world. To Spikeman, the Heartland appears less important than the Rimland, as Rimland could not support a large population due to extreme of climate in central Siberia. He was convinced that it is a combination of land and sea powers controlling the Rimland that would in all probability control the essential powers relations of the world. Spikeman basically divided the world into two tier system, inner core and outer core. In inner core, it is similar, the characteristics of inner core is like, it is similar to the Heartland. He said the Heartland is a region of physiographic difficulties with barriers and extreme climatic constraints such as Siberia. Resources are dominant in the inner core area. Human population is absent. It is neither a natural fortress nor a protected land. Moreover, this region is inhabited by tribals and has primitive civilization, and by no means it can affect the geopolitics of the world. It is a land of miseries with no prosperity. Next area is the Rimland. Rimland, it is similar to the inner crescent and has all the majestic sea powers which scripted the history of modern civilization. All the area of Rimland is connected to water, that is, the Sea of Ocean. For example, China, India, Asian countries, Gulf countries, etc. To Spikeman, Heartland appears less important than Rimland, and his famous dictum was, "Who controlled the Rimland rule Eurasia, who ruled Eurasia controlled the destinies of the world." Writing at the time when the Second World War was still on, Spikeman advocated that the Allied powers such as Britain, France, etc. should base their future foreign policy on preventing any consolidation of Rimland and the enemy. Applications of Rimland theory. In the era of colonization, sea power like British, France, Portuguese, Spain captured or demonstrated their superiority. The naval power was significant. Formation of the Indian Ocean Rim, including Australia and New Zealand, is an effort to consolidate the Rimland through regional groupings such as BIMSTEC, IOR, ARC, etc. Other groups like ASEAN have a focus on similar objective. Geopolitics of Indian Ocean and all the world superpowers have entered the Indian Ocean. This also signifies the importance of Rimland. For example, Regina dialogue pivot to Asia policy of USA. K.M. Panikkar had remarked in the 1970s, "Who controls the Rimland has India at its mercy." USA intervention in West Asia and Gulf countries. During the Cold War period, Eastern Europe was the zone of contention between the superpowers. For example, Cuban Missile Crisis, national missile defense as a strategy of USA. After 1950s, all major wars were fought in Rimland. For example, North-South Korea, Sino-India, Arab-Israel War, Indo-Pakistan War, Gulf Crisis, Afghanistan-Iraq War. With the defeat of Germany in the Second World War and the emergence of the USSR as the sole master of Heartland, Spikeman prescription became the basis of American policies of containment of communism. NATO, Baghdad Pact, and subsequently CENTO, Central Treaty Organization, and SEATO, that is Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, were made by the USA to keep an eye on the defense of Rimland, mainly European and Asian countries, and to prevent the Soviet influence in warm waters of Rimland. Now comes to the criticisms of Rimland. The first criticism was criticized on the ground of advancement of war technology and nuclear deterrence. Spikeman underestimate the role of world community and UNO in promoting world peace. World today is a global village and international law does not permit territorial expansion. That is, Rachel's Lebensraum was no longer applicable, which considered state as a living organism and motivated Hitler for a greater German Reich. It is the time of economic imperialism and not that of political colonization. For example, flooding of Indian market by Chinese goods. Why now come to we can discuss why Rimland is more important than Heartland. Because Rimland has more importance over Heartland because of the following reasons, like at least 40% of the world resources are in the Rimland area, such as oil, continental shelf resource, etc. Rimland countries have huge populations, for example India, China. The Rimland countries are undergoing war against terror, the war against weapons of mass destruction. Rimland consists mostly of developing nations such as India, Indonesia, etc. With this, I conclude this theory of Heartland and Rimland theory. Thank you.